Alright class, so we didn't quite get through all those examples that we needed to get to next video. So I'm going to scan my notes as well for this example, but also work it out just so that you feel good. So kind of real quickly, I'm going to first rework the example we did get through in class today. So we had our heights of women being of 65, so we're centered there. The bottom 25th percentile, so 65 is considered the 50th percentile since half of the data is below it. Percentile is always telling us below. So the 25th percentile will be somewhere on this side of the mean. So we know we want this area to be 25%, where that's our goal defined. So whenever we're doing one of these, we look for in the table whatever number is to the left of our question mark. So our number that's left of the question mark is this 0.25, or since our table gives us 4 decimals for probabilities, I'm going to go ahead and add the 2 extra zeros here. We pull up our table, and I'm going to look for 0.250 on the inside of this table. If I look at my picture, right, I know my z-score is going to be less than 0, or basically it's going to be a negative number because it's to the left of the mean. So I know when I'm looking at my table here that it's going to be on the negative z side. Now, as I said in class, I go down the first column to sort of look for my jump of 0.25. So somewhere between this 0.242 and 0.274 is where 0.25 happens. I work over in those rows to find the closest thing I can. I find these two numbers of 0.2514 and 0.2483. If you pick either of those, I'm happy. This one's a tiny bit closer, so I'm going to choose that one. So that's going to be the number that I write down as I found in my table this 0.2514. Now what I actually want to get from the table is my z-score, and that number is not a z, it's a number on the inside of the table. The number on the outside of the table is my z. So now that I have this number, I just got to figure out what row, negative 0.6, and what column, the 7, do I work at, and then that will tell me then that my z is going to be negative 0.67. Once I have that, I can plug that into my y equals z times sigma plus mu formula, because now my z is at negative 0.67 we just found in the table. Sigma is given us in the problem with this 2.75. Then the mean was also given to us in the problem of the 65. And when we do that math, that's how we got at 63.16 inches. So I could then say that 25% of women are 63.16 inches or shorter. So that one we got through in class, but I wanted to kind of start there as well. For part B, we're asking to find a height that cuts off the top 25%. So we're going to start with that same picture. Still centered at 65. Now this one I'm looking for the top, so the top kind of tells me I'm looking for the right, so I want 25% on the right. At 65, 50% is to the right of it, so to have 25% to the right, I'm going to have to be somewhere over here. And this time I want this area to be 25%, and our goal is to find that number. Now the next thing I do is I go to my question mark and ask myself how much is to the left of that question mark. Again, why left? Because that's the way our table reads. So if there's 25% to the right, but I want to know what's to the left, so I know that 75% is actually to the left. So when I go to the table, I'm actually going to be looking for the 0.75 because that's the number to the left of our question mark. Also from my picture, I know my z should be a positive number. So this time when I pull up my table, I'm going to fly to the positive side here. And this time I'm going to go down this column looking for my 0.75 jump, which happens somewhere between this 0.7257 and 0.7580. Work over till we find the closest thing that we can. So we kind of find this 0.7483 and 0.7517. Again, Either one of those picked, I'm happy. 0.7486 is a tiny bit closer. So here I'm going to say that the 0.7486 was the number I found. But then I got to figure out what that means that Z actually is. So now from my table, I figure out what row that happens at, 0.6. What column that happens at is 7. So putting those together, my Z is going to be positive 0.67. Notice how this relates to A. Here we're 0.67 generations below the mean. Here we are 0.67 generations above the mean. Just as before, I'm going to plug that new Z into my formula. So this time Z is going to be a positive 0.67, but the standard deviation is still 2.75 and the mean is still 65. And this time doing our math, we get 66.84 inches. So this time I can say that 25% of women are 66.84 inches. Or which direction will be shaded to the right, so it's going to be or taller. So the important thing here is we have to look to whatever's to the left of our question mark. So let's see if we can do part C. Maybe a little bit more complicated. So it asks for the middle 75%. So this time I'm going to start with my same picture. That is still centered at 65. But this time I want the middle 75%. So I want this to be 0.75. Now I'm going to go ahead and complete my picture. If there's 75% in the middle, right, how much is left over? Right, so I still have 25% I need to add to my picture. 2 spots to put it in. Right, so that's going to be 12.5%. Or if I put that in decimal form, this is going to be 0.125. And this is going to be 0.125. And then of course I can double check if I add up all my numbers, I still get 100% or 1. So this time I actually need to find 2 different Z's. So I'm going to call this question mark 1 and question mark 2. And I'll make that a little bit curlier. And we'll find each question mark separately. So let's first talk about question mark 1. So if I look at it, I got to figure out how much is to the left of that number. Well, to the left is 0.125. And again, I'm at a 4th decimal place, I'll just put the 0. So I'm going to go to the table looking for my 0.125. I can tell since it's below the mean that it's going to be a negative z-score. I won't find the right number on the wrong side. Right, so I'm going down this first column looking for my jump of 0.125. That happens somewhere between my 0.1151 and 0.1357. Work to find the closest thing I can. And I find this 0.1251. But again, now I need to actually figure out what Z that actually is. So my row is negative 1.1. My column is the 0.5. So my Z, when I put it all together, will be negative 1.15. So now I can use that to plug in for my Y formula. So this time my Z is negative 1.15. Standard deviation was still 2.75. Mean was still 65. And so I get 61.84 inches for that one, which makes sense. It's below my 65. Now I need to do the other question mark. This time I'm looking at how much is to the left of this question mark. Now I gotta make sure I include everything to the left. So it's not only the 75%, it's also this 12.5%. So how much is to the left of my question mark? I have to add those two numbers together. So when I take 0.75 and add that to 0.125, you should get 0.875. And then again with 4 decimals, I'll put a 0. This time we're on the positive side since we're greater than our mean. So we're going to go to that table, look for the closest thing to 0.875 that we can. On here. So looking for our jump happens somewhere between this 8643 and 0.8849. Go find the closest thing, 0.875 I can, and I find this 0.8749. But again, that's not my z. I've got to figure out what row and what column that's in. So that's 1.15. What you'll notice, again, if you compare the two z-scores, that one's just negative and one's positive because we're finding that middle 75% here. So some of the z is just positive. Same standard deviation, same mean, and we get 68.16 inches. And so finally, I can say the middle 75% of women's heights are between our two values. So are between our 61.84 inches and our 68.16 inches. And then finally, just to make sure we had understood percentiles, I wanted to figure out actually what percentiles these are. So let's figure out that 61.84, what percentile was that? Remember, I told you how much is below it. So how much is below this value? 0.0125. So then that's going to then lead me to the 12.5, because we multiply it by 100 here, percentile. And then when we looked at the 68.16, how much is below that? Both those pieces together, exactly what we found in the table. So that would be our 87.5 percentile. And so if you notice, was the difference between those two numbers, that 75% is in the middle. So if I subtract those two numbers, I would get 75. Your other videos are more practice of this, and then a big example of tying both the things that we've learned together that will help prepare you for your quiz.